Miss anyone? Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. And Alison, who is our guest speaker, is from Perth, Australia. She's 9 hours ahead of us. So we're going to let her start and launch so she can get to bed tonight. So I'd like to ask Lois if she would do the introduction, and then we'll launch right into that presentation.
Sure, I'd be happy to. We've invited Reverend Alison Gilchrist to join us this morning and share with us. She is the head of Girls Friendly Society in Perth, Australia. She's going to talk about a couple of their programs that they've launched that are very successful: Wednesday Women and Friendship Fridays. And their goal is, and their purpose is aimed at enabling friendships, connecting lives, and growing hope. She trained for ordination at Canmere Hall, Durham University, and has served in roles across diverse traditions, as well as leading a missional pilot project for the Church of England. Her experience includes 30 years of work in mission on 3 continents. She bases her work on the tenets of the stories of loaves and fishes in the gospel, always seeking what is at hand in order to grow any work she may undertake and help others. I've been watching with admiration the work that she and the other women in GFS Perth have been doing to reinvent, reorganize, revitalize, and grow into maybe a new mission or improve upon past tenets that have underlined their work. She's going to share a little bit about their journey, how they've approached it, and where it's taking them. We're very excited. Alison, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you very much indeed. Now, here we go. Hopefully this will share my screen, and we'll all be able to do this very short journey together. So did that work?
Yes.
Okay. So this is me, probably a couple of years ago, but that is me. And as you've just heard, I live in Western Australia now. I'm actually from the north of England. I'm a Yorkshire woman, so I have a often an incomprehensible accent for some people. But what I thought I'd share was just a whistle-stop, a little bit about me and the basis for how I work, and then how that using our history at GFS has helped us to re-envision the future, as Lois just said. So I've worked in various parts of the world for the church in various capacities, but I do shape my life's work on just some very simple principles. Obviously, the whole of the Bible and the whole of Christian tradition is as part of my teaching as an ordained person. But over the years, I've worked in the poorest communities. I worked in the poorest community in the UK, the very largest council estate in Europe, for some length of time, where I ran a pilot project for the church, and that made me think about how we can share the gospel as simply as possible to give people a chance to step into that journey and make it their own. So basically, I take hold of 3 of the main stories in the gospel that helped me to shape my journey. Lois is right, one of them is the loaves and the fishes, but I also think about Luke's story of the breaking of the bread, when people recognize Jesus in the breaking of the bread. And in nearly every project I've developed over the years, which now amount to hundreds, there's always some breaking of the bread of some description. The loaves and the fishes is the other one. And then the third one is the parable of the weeds or the tares. And the reason for that is that we often want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think we want to get rid of things before they've had a chance to get going. And I wouldn't say we're legalistic, but we tend to be looking for problems in order to get rid of them. And that often, in my experience, means that things don't get a chance to get going. So those are the 3 tenets that kind of underpin what I do. So when, if you know, I don't know how much you know about GFS, but it started in the UK in 1875, and then here in 1884. And we had our first charter in 1888. So it makes us the oldest not-for-profit organisation in Western Australia, the biggest state in Australia and one of the biggest states in the world. The way I approached the journey with GFS, I came to Australia 13 years ago to be the diocesan missioner in the Anglican Diocese of Perth. And then, oh, I went back one, hang on. And then I moved to be the mission director in the Uniting Church. I don't know if you know what the Uniting Church is, but it was an amalgamation of Methodism, Congregational Church and Presbyterians in Australia. And I worked as their mission director. So I worked after doing that for a few years, I worked in a social care agency, a social care not-for-profit, which I ran for 2 years before coming to take on GFS. So I went back to my roots of understanding and thought, what is our history? What have the staunch ladies of GFS handed on to us that we really ought to take into account, because they've managed to bring it along for 140 years. So we looked at our history and reflected on it at length to see what was the gift we've been given in order to move into the future. And I think we all do that as people of faith. We've been given a gift that comes into our hands, the light has been carried to us from previous generations, and we take that forward in our generation, and that's what we've done with GFS. And then we realised that from there we had to have a core understanding. So GFS is not an Anglican organisation. I don't know how people conceive it in America, but it's actually a parachurch organisation and has never been Anglican in that sense. And here in Australia, it's always worked at the side of the church, but there's been a very much a we're Anglican mentality from some of the people involved, and certainly the church wants to subsume us. But it's never been part of the Anglican Church. It's always run along the side as a parachurch organisation. So we wanted to make sure that we understood who we were and developed a really good ethos and culture to work with, so that we could all work together from our base core values. And from there, we decided we needed to be able to very much define who we are. So we looked at our why. We did the Simon Sinek book, What's Your Why, together. And then we worked from that. So as you can see, what do we do? Well, we create welcoming spaces and places where friendships flourish and people can belong and grow. And that's our baseline. We think that's a really important thing. I hope all churches look like that. That would certainly be what I would be hoping for the churches that I've been involved with. And then we do it because we believe friendship is a God-given gift that enables people to thrive. And although we're not in any way an organisation that would say to newcomers that we're a Christian organisation in the same sense as a church, most of us who belong to GFS are people of faith, and we keep that central to what we understand. Our new logo has a cross right in the middle of it. Oops, hang on, I'm not very good at doing this whole moving the PowerPoint on here. Okay, so these are the other things that we decided we need to be. We're accessible to anybody, whatever their story. We're prayerful. We pray for ourselves and others. One of the things we don't shy from is if somebody comes with a story and we feel that a prayer would be the right thing, I've asked everybody in the organisation to offer prayer, and if possible, we'll pray for you, not just tomorrow, say one for me when you're there, but pray now. So we often pray for people there and then, and nobody's ever said no. So we keep that central. We try and be creative and look for new ways to do things and solve problems. Oops, wrong way. We try to be leaders in whatever we do, and we encourage leadership formation. We try to be change makers because the church that we've been walking alongside, the churches we've worked alongside, most of them in Australia, sorry, I've got a very sensitive mouth, and most of them are moribund. Many churches are very low in numbers and struggling to survive. So we realised that, and as an organisation, we'd hit a really bad low. When I took over GFS, it reduced to 17 members, and 6 of those were the board, the management committee. And we collaborated, so we do a lot of work in partnership with other organisations. So that's the basis we work from. Go the other way. Okay, and we have a set of missions, visions and values. We try and be as visual as we can, because like all of you, we work in a very multicultural setting. GFS works in one of the most diverse multicultural settings in the world. All of our work up until that point, having put all our values in place, led us to coining this, catalysing a friendship revolution. Now that I'm not even touching this and it's moving. Hang on a second. Whoops. So that was affirmed, and I'm a bit of a watching for the Holy Spirit moving kind of lady. I went to a meeting with an Australian Minister of a state, and he was talking to the charities from Western Australia. There's a big meeting in one of the big halls in town, and people were saying how disconnected the world was. So we're allowed to ask for a minute to make a speech. So I thought, oh, that's got to be my chance. I like to have a chat when I can. So I jumped up and I said, well, we're a little tiny organisation, but we've been here a long time. And out of nowhere, I heard myself saying this new tagline that we just got, which is catalysing a friendship revolution. And about 300 people suddenly cheered and started clapping like mad. And I was like, oh my goodness, that was not what I expected. But it's really taken people, touched people's hearts, because we, as we know, I'm sure you all know too, that we're a very disconnected world now, even before COVID. And since COVID, it's become more and more disconnected. And so this is where we're working. So that's what we all try and keep central what we're doing. We're trying to start a revolution of people being friends again. Being English, I remember the old Dunkirk spirit, and I try and rally us to that kind of feeling together. Okay, so we moved on from there to develop a roadmap, so something we could all work to, again, very visual and simple, and keeping the 3 central tenets of mission and ministry that I hold dear, central to that. Whoops. The one thing that I would say, if for you, thinking missionally is something that's on your agenda, is over the years working in the different places I've worked across the world, many people spend a long time writing lots and lots of plans, and usually by the time they get to the end of that, they run out of steam and things don't happen. So I always encourage people to use a slightly different approach, which is to grasp ideas as they come to you by the Spirit, or whatever other way you think they come to you, shape them into something that's doable. And with what you have to hand, that's the loaves and fishes story. And then get on with it, really. Be hospitable, invite people to journey with you. Don't rubber things too quickly, don't get rid of things too quickly, but actually do it and reflect as you go. And I'm thrilled to say God's been very gracious to me, because I've not started a project anywhere in the world yet that is no longer functioning since I started doing mission work. So it's proven to be a good model. Okay, so this is our roadmap. We'll try and make things as visual as we can. So that's just something very simple. So we've got a map with the things that we're going to do. You don't really need to look at that, but it just gives everybody a chance to look. So this is the old Townsend Lodge that used to belong to us. And this is part of the story that's really interesting. The lodge had been there for a long time. It was signed off by a chap. We're going the wrong way on the machine again. It was signed off by a gentleman, because in those days, ladies in Australia weren't allowed to own property. And then there was a very difficult period for GFS just before I came to work for them, when somebody tried to say that it didn't belong to us, that it actually belonged to the local diocese. And so we spent some years in a very uncomfortable legal battle with the Diocese of Perth to prove that it belonged to us. And it did. It always had done. But anyway, I won't go down that road because it's a long time ago now. But we did. We sold the lodge. Sadly for us, there was no business acumen in the people who were on the committee at the time. They were just lovely ladies with a passion for others, but they didn't have any business acumen. So we got a very small amount, just a few million for it. And the man who developed, the company who developed the site, made $200 million out of it. And had we had somebody savvy, like some of you are, we might have gone into a business partnership and had a lot more money in our bank. But anyway, we bought ourselves a little place in the Swan Valley, which is this other picture here. So we've moved out of town, and we now live we're now based in the Swan Valley. We're going to develop a space in the Swan Valley that's going to be, the 2 bases for our future are going to be friendship, enabling friendship, and creation care, from the 5th mark of mission from the Anglican Church, which is care for creation. So we're developing a site which will have permaculture as its basis, and from there we'll build outwards from that site. the other way. And this is what it will look like. So we've got 4 acres. And we're developing a social enterprise. I don't know how many of you know about those and how many of them interact with them in America, but we know that we're going to struggle financially going forward. People in Australia aren't giving to charities like they used to. We have grown our membership from 17. We now have 52 members, which isn't bad because we haven't worked on it very hard, but people have heard the vision and wanted to join us. We have about another 35 people waiting for membership, but we've just rewritten our constitution, so we've had to wait for that. But we're looking to have 200 members by the end of this, where we're now, yeah, the end of this year. There are lots of people waiting to join, and definitely we've got some applications just pending. And so we're developing the core of our business. We'll have a cafe and a shop. We'll grow things, and then the cafe and shop will help to deliver them. And that will be the core of our earning potential going forward. So it's a slightly different model than most GFSs in the world. So we run these groups. So when I first took over, we said we got down to 17 people. I was probably the youngest member. I was the second youngest member of GFS at the time, and I was obviously in my 60s. I'm 62 now, so no, I was just coming into my 60s. It's always been a women's organisation, so we started Wednesday Women. It runs once a month on a Wednesday, and as you can see, we have strong, supportive friendships, heart-warming fun, and life-changing feats. And so what we do is we meet once a month usually for a speaker, when we ask women to share their stories with us. For 20 to 25 minutes, and then from there we have a question time, and it's building up our hearts as people share their stories. And we have food to start with, lots of fun and laughter, then we listen to a speaker, and then we do feats together. And it says feats because I'm very much into having things easy to remember, and alliteration is really helpful for that. But we do all sorts of things. So this year we've provided courage kits for a local charity who delivers to women in refuges. So they're like rucksacks and bags full of things for women who've just left difficult situations. And we've also done the Women's Walk for Cancer in WA and raised $4,000 from our little group for that. But it's growing. We've had 75 women involved in that programme since it started, and it's still growing. The lovely thing is, it's always unexpected. So at the last meeting, a 70-year-old lady came to me and said, "Can I just have a quick word? I've never been before. I'm really pleased to be here." And out of her hand, she undid her hands like this and held up to me her GFS beret from when she was a little girl, which she had kept all through her life. So I was able to say to her just 2 weeks before, I'd been delivering to a group of just a French, what do you call it? A support group for older adults. And there was 100 people in the room, and a lady came up to me and she started to cry, and I thought, oh, what did I say in my talk that was so distressing? She came wambling up and she said, "I loved GFS, it shaped my life, and I still have all my GFS things in my bedside table." So it's made a big difference. And so we're hearing lots of stories from women, and in October this year, we're going to do what we call the reunion of friends, and we're trying to re-engage with everybody who's been part of GFS or their families in WA. At the moment, we're looking to have about 400 people there, just to say, this is what GFS did in the past and what it's going to do in the future. So this is Jane and I. We're the 2 people who did the walk this year. And one of the things that we did to raise money this year is we did a bubble blast. This whole thing about not taking too long to decide to do something. A friend and I were talking about how captivating bubbles were. So we had a look on the internet at what you could do with bubbles, and then we joined with a local church and said, "Can we use your grounds?" And we ran a bubble day. So we just had 2 hours of doing things with bubbles, as in blown bubbles, big bubbles, small bubbles. The amazing thing was, we had a great time. Lots of people came, brought their kids, but people were wandering in there because the church is in the middle of a park. People were wandering around. We had 11 tourists from South Asia who were just coming past, and they asked if they could join in. And 2 of them were older ladies, probably the same age as the GFS ladies, and they absolutely loved it. And they said when they'd gone home from their holiday, they were going to suggest to their church in South, I think, Malaysia, that they ought to have bubbles at church. So that was quite good fun. We have a thing called Friendship Fridays. That happens with a local church, as you can see here. We partner with St Matthew's Church, which is one of the churches I used to run as part of my job. I did half-time in the diocese and half-time leading a church, and St Matthew's was one of them. A friend now runs that. And so we meet every Friday morning, as you can see, and we do all sorts, but it's mainly fun. So in the top picture, you can see Miriam, who's our newest member of staff, who's a South Sea Islander, teaches hula. So people come and do hula dancing, and we do crafts, and we play games, and we have people with challenges who pop in from time to time. So the young man here, he's got some challenges, but he comes along, and his care worker said he's flourished since he's been in our environment. So we've probably had about, we've been running that for less than a year. We've had about 60 people through that up to now. We also run something that came out of my work in the UK. When I was a minister in the UK, I worked in some tough places. Many of the families didn't have any have their own families close by, no extended family. So we started grandparenting schemes back in the days when that was much easier. And so when I took over GFS, when I came to lead GFS, I started what we call Engaging Generations, which is a social mentoring program between children and adults. And it's probably one of the most revelationary things that I've done. The reason I did it was when I worked in Bassendean and ran the church in Bassendean, which is about 20 minutes from here. When I first came to Australia, I had an elderly Roman Catholic nun who had left her order and then got married, came to see me. And she said she didn't want to become a member of the Anglican Church officially, but she would like me to welcome her in an unofficial capacity. She and her husband would like to become part of us. And she'd been a teaching nun for many years and was dying very slowly of a very degenerative heart condition. So she joined the church, and I just thought I would nurse her. Peter, her husband, was distressed at the thought of losing her, and we just thought we would nurse her through her faith and our community to her end. And then we had a young family came to us, and they had had some really big issues around drugs, really, and people in their family in and out of in and out of prison and in really hardcore drugs. And the two children in the family were struggling at school. So I just said in passing one day to Eileen, who'd been a teaching nun and the headmistress of a school, would you do some mentoring, some teaching with these children? And she said, maybe I would. So that was 13 years ago, and she was told she had less than 6 months to live. Both of those children have gone on to have fantastic careers. The girl has an MA now and is working in Queensland. The young boy wasn't particularly academic, but now has a fantastic apprenticeship and is about to start his own electrical business. And Eileen is still trucking along, looking very happy, and has not died because she got some purpose back in her life. So that prompted me to begin this. And so we run Sunflower Club in the local school. So, I should say, I'm the only person who's worked for GFS for the last couple of years. We've just taken on a part-time bookkeeper and a part-time support worker to help me with this, because things are starting to grow and I can't actually cope with developing a 4-acre farm and everything else. So I've been running this on my own with just a couple of volunteers. But we started running sunflower clubs in a local school. We did one for the first couple of years. It's had an amazing effect on the children. What we do is we go into school. We have 2 hours with them, or we used to have 2 hours with them on a Monday morning. I have 2 older volunteers, both members of GFS, who come in and teach them crochet and knitting. And one of our members is a lady who's in a wheelchair, a young woman in a wheelchair, who's also a qualified counsellor. The 3 of them come in and we work with this group of kids, all on the verge of being excluded from school. And one of them in particular ran amok. Nobody in school could get anywhere near this little girl. And within 12 months, she completely rehabilitated because she has time to be with grandma or a grandma figure. And it's backed by research. I'm sure you know all about the research about how to engage trauma. I'm a qualified trauma coach as well. So how to engage trauma and consistency of an adult in your life is the biggest changing factor for young people. So it's having a marked effect, so much so the head teacher of that school has asked us to do 2 now. And we've had approaches from 4 other schools to run clubs there, but we just don't have the capacity. the thing about that is most of the Anglican churches here, in fact, most of the denominational churches here have fairly elderly congregations. And so that you have a gift. And so if you can find yourself a mechanism, then you could do the same thing. And Letter Link Up is just taking on board some of the things. We'd started doing it before COVID, but COVID did that where people were writing to, kids were writing to people in old age pensioners settings. So what we do is we have 40 children in local schools who write to 40 members of the local community. Took a while to get all the safety covering to make sure that the kids couldn't be connected with the adults without any supervision. So there is a mechanism that we had to build, but that's working really well. And the children absolutely love it. They all, everybody, and if the letters don't go out, the older people get on the phone or on email and say, "Where's my letter?" So that's really good. So there you go. That's another thing that we're doing. Whoops. Okay, so we try and use all the mechanisms. Till it's late at night here. We try and use whatever mechanisms we can to get our message out. So we do social media, and we have a website. Do have a look at our website. It's got lots of information on. It's being revamped. Our latest catchphrase is start a trend, bring a friend. It's really easy to say those things and then to live by it. So we try and encourage everybody in the organisation to do that. There was another slide which I must have flicked over, there we are. So that's the other major change for us this year. I just wanted to say to you that it's not all been plain sailing. We were going along nicely, and then in May last year we had a complete board implosion. I wasn't there one evening, and there was a massive fallout, and everybody the whole board walked on the same day. And so at that point, I thought I was going to have to wind the organisation up, but we've now regrouped. So the board, it was the ministry, it wasn't called, that was called the management team before. They all disappeared. So since then, we've worked together to rebuild the organisation, and this is how we look now. So from an organisation that only had 17 members, we now have all these people on board. So we have 2 members of staff, we have a full thriving board, and we have 5 advisors who work with us and give their time pro bono. So I don't want to give the impression that it's all been plain sailing. That was a big issue. And the other thing that's a big issue is our site. When the people who bought the site in West Swan bought it, they thought they could do whatever they wanted and just build GFS Friendship Central there. But actually, we're having to build it around an agricultural base because they bought an agriculturally zoned site. So the site is zoned for agriculture primarily, and everything else is incidental to agriculture. So although we had creation care in our sites, we didn't expect to have to build it like that. So that's been another thing. So we've had to do a big pivot in the way that we approach our ministry, because we now have a 4-acre agricultural site that has to have agriculture as its primary purpose. Okay, so the way that we work at GFS Perth is we understand we've been given a gift that we believe we've got to take to the future. We believe it's God's given us the custodian job in this season, and that we've got to do the best we can. We always look to our heritage. We always use what we've got to hand. We try always to be hospitable. And at the moment, God's been really good to us, and we're flourishing. That's all I've got to say.
That's wonderful. Do you want to just stop the slide share so we can